Hi, everybody.
Thank you to Dr. Christie. Jen is back. We're going to bring in our next guest. Oh, that was a wild panel.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to bring our next guest, who is almost, his story is as wild as those guys were. So we're going to bring him in, guys. Welcome in James Venhaus.
Hey, everybody. How's it going, Jen?
Doing really good. Welcome, everybody that is watching us out on all our different streaming. You're watching the EXP Expo, part of the experience, or the comic book shopping experience. This one, what you want to call it. We just use the shortened version because, we're lazy about putting the whole thing in there. James Venhaus and I have been friends for a while, because he lived much closer to me in Dallas, but sadly is not so anymore. But where did you move to? I totally forgot.
I'm near Washington, D.C. I'm in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, so you're not hopping in the car and coming down to Cadets Con.
No, I'm not. Yeah, it was. You can do the drive in 2 days. I did it in 3. It's not. Yeah, it's not around the corner like it used to be.
No, it was always so excited for any event we had, because you were always game for coming down, because it was a link to the Texans. We're all Texas people, so I used to just think it was the best thing ever, because my staff was so enamored with the book, and so for them it was like, Miss Jen, invite that rock star over to the store. With him.
I can count the number of times I've been called a rock star in my life on one finger. So that's the way it is with this industry, right? Like, different books resonate with different people, and those people are retailers. And so, when the book hits with a retailer, they talk it up to their customers, and so then your customer base gets to be much larger in one store than it is in another, based on whether or not kind of resonates with that crowd. It's fascinating to me how this industry works.
Yep. So in your real life, you are not by nature a comic book creator. You have a totally other career. Tell everybody what you do for your normal 9 to 5.
My normal 9 to 5. Yeah. Well, for the last 22 years, I was a theater teacher. And this year is my first year to be a full-time school administrator. So I'm the director of fine arts at a great school called the Flint Hill School. And it's interesting because people don't assume that those things are related. But my life in the theater, I started out as an actor, was all about storytelling. And as I started directing plays and started to look at a bigger picture on how stories are put together, I started to also be a playwright. So I had these 3 things going on in the theater: as an actor, and as a director, and as a playwright. And, to me, comics were a natural extension of that, because it's one more format that we tell stories in, right? So people always say, oh, your other life is so different than this one. I was like, oh, not really. They're all about really, really cool ways to tell stories.
Oh, absolutely. All right. I got to shout out to my girl here. Hold on.
Okay.
Hi, Miss Tina. Sorry. I saw her come in. I love her. She's so much fun. So in regard to your early career in the theater, was it something you always wanted to do? Was that were you a theater person on stage or behind the stage in high school?
Yeah, in junior high, I took a lot of art classes because I had a lot of free time as a young person. Just so drawing was like the thing that I did. And when you're by yourself, you don't know if you're any good or not. And then I had a best friend who was such a great artist. Anything he could sketch looked so great, and I was like, oh, this is not my thing. But again, that was that visual storytelling that I think later led me to comics. But I'd signed up for an 8th grade art class, and art was full, and they stuck me in drama, and I was so bitter, because I really wanted to be in art, and I was so mad. And in a way, I have been in a theater classroom as a student or a teacher for the next 30 years after that. I've not really left the theater classroom, but what got me hooked was, I don't know what we did. We did some assignment, and being kind of shy and having not a lot of friends and not fitting into the popular social groups. If you get on stage and you get a laugh, because something you did is funny, you are hooked. You are absolutely hooked. So yeah, there's that, again, we go back to that, like that power of storytelling. When you really hook an audience, you're there for life.
So in your origin story, instead of having like a dirty, dastardly person in an alleyway with a gun and there's pearls, yours is the school counselor saying, nope.
Art is full. Yeah. So, no, the cutest girl in the 8th grade, in the back of the room laughing at something I did, that was my radioactive spider that bit me and gave me superpowers at that point. So,
so when you look back at those times, was there a production that was your favorite you really loved?
Man, so many. We did a few shows, one in high school called Done to Death, and it was this murder mystery. It was a group of mystery writers that had gotten together to try to write a TV show together. And each time one of them came up with an idea, it would be acted out on a side stage. Their ideas come to life. And I played a variety of different parts, including a gangster who had to murder his wife. And so, yeah, that was just, again, I think playing different characters and getting on stage and being somebody else is like the ultimate shy kid release, right? You get to really, really invest in those characters and tell those stories.
I think theater can really impact you. My father's credit, if I showed the tiniest bit of interest in anything, he used to totally take me to those things. He took me to the symphony and to the theater and just any concert that I wanted to go to. I think it was to kind of see, what inspired me to want to do things. And I can remember going to see in Austin, they have this little tiny theater in Zilker Park. And I went to see Brigadoon there, and it affected me deeply.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think everyone has one of those stories, right? Their first theatrical experience, their first thing that they sat and watched. We had a school field trip when I was really young to see, I think, a production of The King and I, the Roger Hammerstein musical. And I think the thing that amazed me, I don't know why this stuck with me, was that it was one of those shows where they didn't do blackouts in between the scenes. They just sort of dimmed the lights and you could see the stage crew moving the scenery. And that was kind of part of what you were supposed to see. And I was fascinated by that. Like, actual people are moving actual objects and creating different spaces, and that it's okay for us to sort of see that and peel that back. That's a weird thing to remember for your first theatrical experience, but I was hooked by set changes. I don't know why that hooked me, but it did. Yeah, it did.
And I'll tell you, the other thing I learned from that experience is that you usually think that like what you want to be is the main characters, right? Everyone's always trying to be the main characters in there. But the thing I remembered about that production specifically is there was a woman that played a part that was, I don't even know if she had a speaking role, but I watched her specifically through the whole play because she was so good at emoting, and her body language and everything she did made it more real. So I was like, I'll never be able to, I don't remember her name. I don't know how to get in touch with her, but I hope that she went further, because it's like those, don't think that because you're a side character in any industry that you're not like the lifeblood of it or being noticed or like someone's favorite thing ever, because it was what I learned about that.
I did a production of Death of a Salesman in college, and the main character, Willie Loman, has two sons, Biff, who's considered sort of the lead of the show, the co-lead, and then Happy, who's a much smaller part. And of course I was going out for Biff, everybody was. And I ended up getting Happy, and the director said, you don't say a whole lot, but your face, you were reacting the whole time. And I need that in the show. And I have, to this day, still don't know if he was just gently letting me down or if that was a real thing. But I took it to heart, right? Like, everybody on stage has got to be in that moment and processing the information the way your character would. And everything happens through your face. Everything happens through the way you react to what's going on. It draws people into the story because they're reacting to it too. So those smaller characters get to be like the avatar for the audience. And you get to see the play through that character's eyes. And that's an important part.
So I'm sure you've had lots and lots of students over the years. Is there anybody that kind of like, maybe not that went on to be famous, but like stuck in your mind as being like really talented?
Yeah, several. Yeah, a lot of them from my most recent experience are musical theater kids, and some of them are are straight actors, you know, in plays and movies, and that they all have just a love of theater, whether they do it community theater or whether they're doing it professionally or whether they're just season ticket holders at, you know, the Alley Theater in Houston. Like it's just that lifelong love of theater and storytelling that interests me. But yeah, I've had some amazing kids. The kind of students that I think every teacher will admit, maybe not on campus, but in situations like this, we can admit it. You meet those kids, you're like, this kid's going to be good no matter who their teacher is. I just happen to be here when this kid walked through the door. And you hope to be able to sort of help them through their 4 years of high school, or, you know, whatever time you have them with, and facilitate their, you know, moving on to the next step. But they're going to be amazing no matter who their teacher is. So those stick out. And the kids that are really helped, the kids that will come to you later and go, well, if it wasn't for you, you know, I wouldn't have made it through high school. If it wasn't for you, you know, I wouldn't be doing this. Those you remember those too.
Yeah, I think teachers probably need to hear it more often when they've impacted our lives. Sometimes it's just too late for us to be able to go back and say, because we didn't know until way later in life what the impact of their involvement in our early life was. The teachers deserve a lot of credit for being there for us when we're in the most awkward phases of our lives. And we are.
Well, now that I'm in a position to mentor teachers, one of the things I tell them is you're not going to hear that as often as you think you should. Like, you know how much work you put into making sure that kid was successful. But to them, it was school. And especially younger kids, they don't really know how much effort the teacher puts into creating a positive atmosphere in the classroom. They just know that they went to school that day and it was fun, or it was rewarding, or it wasn't. And the teacher's role in that's a little fuzzy to the kid. And when they get to be teenagers, and developmentally, it's very appropriate for them to be very, very self-centered. You know, they accomplished everything, and they're not fully aware of the role their parents and their teachers had in creating that positive atmosphere. So, you know, you sometimes hear thank you from the really aware kids that are sort of cognizant of that and can think about other things. But most of the time, their success or their happiness is all the thanks you're going to get. And that's okay, because that's appropriate too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think you probably have a lot of things to deal with as a teacher, because you don't know what happened right before they walk into your classroom. They got tripped in the hallway, or someone pushed them into a locker, or they just broke up with their girlfriend, or, you know, they just got great news and they're so excited they can't focus anymore. So you have a lot coming at you, like stuff's, you know, crazy going on at the house.
Yeah, it's the home stuff really that you get a lot of, you know, and you learn. I think that's part of your training as an actor. So theater teachers or performing arts teachers in general, choir and band, those teachers can get a really good sense of reading the room. Mm-hmm. And just, you know, I'm not going to call on that kid today because I can see that they're having a hard time, and let's give that kid a break, and let's come back to that kid later. And that, again, kid is sometimes completely unaware that that's what you're doing. But you learn to do that over the years. And that's that acting training. Like, I can see by the look on their face how they're feeling and what kind of day they're having.
So how much is like script writing for the theater like script writing for comics?
Well, that's a great question, because to me, I don't see a big difference, because that's the way I write scripts. Like, I write scripts that are very dialogue centered. You know, for some people have heard the story, you know, you've heard the story before, but I sort of broke into comics by just deciding I would make comics today, right? So I had this idea, and I read every article you can possibly read on how to break into comics, and they all say the same thing: make comics. And it's a little bit different for artists who can have a portfolio, and very, very good unpublished work will still get you noticed. If you know how to draw characters, and you know how to draw expressions that communicate emotions, and you can do sequential storytelling as an artist, if you're good enough, you will get noticed. But as a writer, like, everybody has a script, right? Everybody has an idea, and you can't just shop your script around. So, you know, I did the Kickstarter and got a comic produced. And when I was looking at the script, again, the internet is filled with people's advice on how to write a comic book script. And most of them will tell you this is the only acceptable way to write a script, and no one will take you seriously unless you format it this way. Most of those people have written books that they're trying to sell you, but that's okay. That's, you know, that's their thing. But if you actually download actual comic scripts that authors have been nice enough to publicly, post on their websites. There's no one format. So, I went with the format that I knew best, which was playwriting. And I wrote dialogue, and I wrote, stage directions, which told the artist essentially what to draw. And then as I worked with artists, I learned what I needed to go back and explain more of. So we worked on Night Owl Society as a 3-issue series. The script that I gave the artist for issue 1, when he came back with questions, it led me to think, okay, I obviously need to put that in the script. So the script for issue 2 had a little bit more detail, and the script for issue 3, where we started to come up with a language that we used. But yeah, to me, the storytelling is storytelling, and characters are characters, and every good story has an arc and a beginning, middle, and an end, and I'm writing them in the same way. To me, what makes it different is not the script, it's the story. Like a playwriting professor told me years ago, why is this a play? Why is it not a movie? Why is it not a book? Why is it not something else? What's inherently theatrical about your idea that makes it have to be a play? And as a playwright, I was working with this. I'm working at a private school, working with kids who had a lot of privilege and a lot of a lot of resources, a lot of money, and a lot of free time, and a really, really strongly ethical sense of what was right and wrong. And I was like, I would love to write a story about what these kids would do if they ever really finally pulled the trigger on using their resources, a lot of unsupervised time, a lot of money, and an overdeveloped sense of right and wrong. And what if they went out and fought crime? Well, that's not a play. That's a comic. That is just in the essence of that idea lends itself to comic books. So I didn't start to write comics because I wanted to write comics. I started to write comics because I had an idea that needed to be a comic. And that started this incredible journey that leads us to where we are now.
So you brought this up, and that makes me really curious that they pointed out, like, why is this a play? What about what happens in a play makes it a play and not workable as something else per se?
I think what's theatrical about it. Like in movies, it's a little harder to time travel, or obviously we have science fiction that's really, really good at that kind of stuff. But just to think back and have a memory, or to be really dialogue centered, and to be one central location, the unity of time and place, where you sort of, a 10-minute play is 10 minutes out of somebody's life. That sort of doesn't work as well. But I think about things that are theatrical. Death of a Salesman is a great example. He's having a really hard time mentally, and we see his memories live on stage. And that the fact that there are real people on stage with him and not a flashback in a movie, when those actors are in the same room as the audience, then we realize that memory or that delusion that he's having is really, really real to him. There's a great play called Proof by David Auburn, who won the Pulitzer in 2003, I think. And it's a woman who is having processing the grief of losing her father, and the dead father is a character on stage that talks to her, and she talks to him. And in the movie that they made with Gwyneth Paltrow, which was good, in the movies, the dead person can fade out, or be a ghost-like figure. On stage, that's a real person in the same room as the audience. So when we find out that he's a ghost, or he's dead, or he's a figment of her imagination, we are freaked out as an audience because he was with us too. Right. So to me, Proof is an idea that works better as a play, and really, frankly, doesn't work as a movie. There's a theatricality in that idea.
Mm-hmm. A lot of sense. So we have a pretty big audience today that may not be familiar with your work in Night Owl Society. For those characters, for that series, what did the characters come first, or the bare bones idea of what the book's hook was going to be?
Yeah, I think the hook came first. Like I said, the idea that kids with privilege, kids with a lot of unsupervised time and a lot of money, and kids from a school, like I taught in an Episcopal school, and ethics is part of the curriculum. And as young people, they don't understand how complicated the world is. So to them, it's very black and white. And this is wrong, and someone should fix it. And it was the hook. It was, what if these kids did go out and try to fix it? So that was the hook. And then you got to build the team. And that's the most fun of writing a team book, in my opinion. I think everybody who's ever written Avengers or X-Men or JLA starts with who's going to be on my team. And I thought, well, who would do this? It would be a kid who, maybe suffered a loss or had a reason and had nothing to lose, right? Like his family situation, his friend situation. The person with nothing to lose is going to push the story forward. And he's going to need certain people. He's going to need muscle. He's going to need a computer expert. He's going to need a person who knows how to get things. He's going to need, somebody who's really good at fighting. And so I started to look around my own school and see, these kids are all here. Like a super team exists in every school if you know where to find them. And it was really, really fun to put the characters together. So yeah, hook first, character second. And I thought, what would they fight? Well, who would they go after? And because mobs are such a fun things to write and fun movies to watch, and their families too, and they have their rules and they have their, sort of organization that goes in deep. I thought, yeah, they would fight the mob. There would be a mob issue that that they would need to find a reason to stop this guy. And from there on, yeah, it was just fun writing. Really, really fun to write.
I find it interesting that, yes, you're right. All of those characters, you need all their skill sets. But I think about them in terms of people in high school. Like, I think it would have taken more pages of convincing than we had.
Yeah.
I assume there's other stuff that happens between the panels.
Yeah. And good comic book writing, just like good playwriting, the audience imagines the stuff you didn't write and fills in the blanks, but you've created the framework that leaves it open to that. Yeah, one of the things that made Night Owl Society so much fun when it came out was just that it was, from a sales point of view, it didn't blow the roof off, but from a customer engagement point of view, like everybody loved this book. And I'm not trying to, toot my own horn, but it just was so well received because people just resonated with these. But everybody said, I want to hear more from these characters. And I very rarely hear, I want to know what happens next. I heard, I want to know more about these characters. So yeah, Night Owl Volume 2, Series 2, that I have partially scripted, but mostly in my head is an issue devoted to each character. Because I think there's a lot of stories there.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right about that. I think, so are you going to try, this is the M. Night Shyamalan problem. He did such a good job of having like this crazy reveal in the first series that it's one of those jaw-dropping moments where you're like, what? Are you going to try to have those moments for these characters in their books or just explore them interestingly?
I think there are the answer is yes and no, which is like the worst answer ever. Because you don't want to get trapped. I think you bring up a great example. M. Night Shyamalan got trapped in that, right? Like now everyone in all of his movies is expecting a reveal. So now they're looking really, really hard. So you have to make that twist extra unrealistic to actually surprise anybody. Or you make it a decent twist, but because people were looking for it, they discover it early on. I sat there and watched, what was it, The Village, which I thought was a great movie. But the whole time I'm like, yeah, this isn't real. It can't be because it wouldn't be an M. Night Shyamalan movie if it was. And so, you can get caught into, well, my thing is crazy reveals. I guess I have to have a crazy reveal. I think when the story lends itself to that, you do it, and then you don't if you don't. I have two secrets in this universe that haven't been revealed yet, that they're characters that I have secrets. They've already met the characters. I think will reveal more, that there's more to this world than people think. And that's going to be fun to write. It's going to be a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, I think that specifically in that movie, there's a masterclass section that happens in filmmaking. That it's just like that moment when they take all the sound away and the character looks down and sees him in the chest is just masterclass.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's gotta be motivated by the story. It can't just be, well, here's the time where we put this in. But yeah, when it works like that, like what you described, it's incredible.
And to your credit, when the stuff gets revealed in your book, it feels like that moment.
Yeah.
It's like going along just fine. And then,
damn. Well, thank you. That's really great to hear.
I think I yelled out loud, honestly.
Yeah, if you write those reveals well, and I tried really hard to do this. I mean, panel by panel, looking at what clues are too many and what clues are too few. That people should say either I never saw that coming, or I should have. Mm-hmm. It was all right there in front of me, but I didn't put the pieces together. Because if your reveal is too unrealistic, people will go, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's just got to be, plausible enough where you go, oh yeah, no, that would happen. That's exactly where. And then there were clues. I didn't see them. So yeah, that's fun to write.
I think it would be really hard to know what the thing is that you're going to reveal and try to know where and how much to put stuff in to let the audience feel smart.
Yes, right. Yeah, and the same is true in comedy. I've studied a lot about comedy because when I write plays, I try to write things that are funny. You set up expectations and you subvert them. You do that comedic twist. You're expecting something and then you get something else. But the best jokes or the best funny moments is when the audience makes a little bit of a leap and connects the dots themselves. Just tell them that, and yeah, then they feel smart, they feel engaged in the story, and they feel like they're part of it because they figured it out. Yeah. I
always feel like the best comedians are the ones where they bring something that happens earlier in their act back at the end. So, yeah. I mean, everyone in the whole room was there the whole time. It's not like everybody isn't in on this second joke that's tied to the first one, but it somehow makes everyone in the room feel like they're the smart kid in the room because they remembered, aha, I know where this fits.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you reward your audience. You assume your audience is smart. You assume your audience is paying attention. And you assume your audience cares about the same things you care about. And that, you and your audience will go down that path together, and it's really fun. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. So you did mention that there's going to be a second series for Night Owl Society. Will these explorations into the new characters, will they be called Night Owl Society, or will they be named for the characters themselves?
I like the way British TV series don't do seasons, they do a series. And I love that you could have a 6-episode series that tells a story, and then they put that out there. And then when they're ready to do another one, there's another one. Because to me, the idea of a monthly ongoing book is really, really intimidating. I need to break up the story arcs, take a break between story arcs. And so, in IDW and some of the indie publishers are really good about those kinds of things. I look at 30 Days of Night, which just had several 30 Days of Night series. Anytime they felt like they had a new story to tell. So yeah, Night Owl Society : whatever my subtitle is after that. But the idea is that it's the same adventure told through each of the 5 characters' point of view. So each chapter is told from one point of view. The next chapter backs the story up to the beginning and tells it from another point of view. But each time you get a little farther in the story, and you get some reveal about this thing that made no sense in chapter 1 now makes sense because you saw it from someone else's point of view. And so yeah, the scripting is taking a while because there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, you have to make sure that when you go back to another character that they don't mess up another one's storyline that you're hoping for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to have the whole thing plotted out before you can start. But I draw a lot on my school experience. I've taught at 3 different private schools, and there's each of them have a different culture, and each of them have a different identity, and there's just some things that are really unique to that. When I had the idea that there would be a mob boss as one of the central figures of the story, there was a school that I worked at where the rumor was that one of the parents was connected to organized crime in Dallas. And he owned a chain of car washes, because in organized crime, anything, and I did some research on this, anything that's a cash only business is really easy to go. Well, it happened in Breaking Bad. They ended up buying a car wash at the end of Breaking Bad in the last season because it was an easy way to launder money. You don't know how many washes you gave. Most people pay in cash, So anything coin operated, laundromats, car washes, where the authorities couldn't tell you how many washes there were. You just make your deposit at the end of the day, and you say it's all from car washes. And apparently back in the 80s, video arcades were mobbed up like crazy.
Oh, that makes sense.
I know, right? So it's all quarters. So yeah, we used to joke that they would pay their tuition in quarters. But but the idea was, and then we had at that same school, Don Henley's kids went to that school because he decided that it was a good school and that really not a lot of people had heard of it. It was tucked away in a little neighborhood. It was a small school. It was a good school. And that his kids would not be, and he could come to school when he could, and there would not be photographers. Because there are some, like there is in Houston, like, you know, there's some very well-known, very well thought of private schools. So if he lived in Houston, he's not sending his kids to Kincaid. He's not sending them to St. John's. He's going to send them someplace else. So this is the way it was in Dallas. And what it led to was that other musicians in Dallas got the word that this place is cool for your kids to go. Mm-hmm. So Andre 3000 and, you know, some of those people were sort of on the admissions tours every once in a while. And so they're like, there's the way to build a really, really cool universe in this that would bring in all kinds of incredible characters. I also met a woman who's the mom of one of my daughter's classmates. She walks with a bit of a limp, and I asked her one time, what's the cause of that? I don't remember how I asked it. It wasn't like that. And she goes, well, I was shot in the line of duty. And I went, really? What did you do? She goes, oh, well, I look really young. I went undercover in high schools. And we were looking for a particular drug guy, trying to get a connection with him. And I made friends with his son. And I was like, oh, that's going in the book. So I don't know if that's in series 2 or in series 3 or at some point like that idea that there would be that the people, that the leads don't know who to trust because we don't know who's connected with what. We don't know who's connected with the mob. We don't know who's undercover, like that constant sense of danger. And that the lead characters in the book suddenly realize I'm not at the school I thought I was, or my friends aren't who I thought they were, or my world is different than what I thought it was. So their reality sort of changes, you know, at various points throughout the saga. There would be some time where the rules for the lead characters completely change.
I love that the universe is going to just keep opening and unfolding to the reader. That idea is really impactful. Now I'm all jazzed. I'm always jazzed. I'm always bugging you. Like, when's the next book?
I know. You know what it's like with publishing, though, and that I think this is a fascinating part of what I learned, because when I learned about writing comics, I also learned about publishing at the same time. And then when the comic came out, then I learned all about your end of things. I learned all about retail. It's a fascinating industry, but if you are a creator and you are doing creator-owned stuff, you are taking 100% of the financial risk.
Yep.
And that business model to me is not my favorite business model. And I worked with great people at IDW. I loved the people I worked with at IDW, but their creator-owned thing, and I imagine this is true with many publishers, you need to produce a fully produced, lettered, colored, formatted book that you just simply upload to us. We will print it and distribute it to comic shops all over the country and put it in the Diamond Previews catalog and in-house ads and other things. We'll do all that. And then we'll split the money at a rate that I imagine is different, you know, from creator to creator. But I'm not a writer artist. I'm just a writer. So I have to pay an artist, and I have to pay a letterer, and I have to pay a colorist, and I have to do all of the financial risk. And if my royalty income doesn't pay me back, then I lose money. But my editor, who's a wonderful man, is on salary. And whether my book succeeds or fails, he gets a paycheck every month. And so like that model, and I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but that just sort of pushing the risk down to the creator is something I'd like to see changed, which is why the projects that you and Kyle and people are working on, just a more direct connection between creator and customer, a more direct involvement with comic shops in how the industry works. I'm following that closely because I think that's something needs to change.
I have a feeling that there's an awful lot of really great work out there. That's one of the things I learned from COVID shutdown when we made just this mega group called Plan C, which is just all the creators and publishers and retailers that we could find, throw them all in one room together so we could still, make things happen. The thing that I've realized is that there's a lot of really amazing self-published work out there that I would have never known about.
Yeah.
They would have had to know about me and sent me an email that I had time to open up and give the time to. Although I want to do that for every single thing as a store owner, it just becomes impossible. But that slowdown, as much and as horrible as COVID has been, that slowdown has allowed a great many small projects to be seen by small publishers. And I can kind of see from that group, there's stuff that got grabbed out of there and is now, I see announcements about it showing up at small press, which makes me so happy that it's going to get to a larger audience, because there was some stuff that just blew my mind that it hadn't been picked up by a publisher.
Oh, the number of artists out there that are very, very good is a much bigger number than the artists who are actually getting published right now. And of course, then there's the artists who aren't good yet, that all want to be published. And so we've got to, make sure that there's still a system where we're helping people get better. The number of gatekeepers that there are in the comics industry between someone who has an idea for a comic and someone who wants to read that comic. There are so many obstacles along the way. And some of them are good. Some of them make sure that the best quality product eventually reaches the market. And some of them aren't so good. You get some diversity and equity issues with if you can only produce comics if you can afford the cash to make the comic, then there's going to be a certain demographic of people who makes comics and a certain demographic of people who don't. And that doesn't feel right to me either.
So here's a crazy question. You had to go out and find an artist and an inker and a colorist, all those things. And there's not like the artiststore.com where you can go and find them. How did you hook up with your team?
DeviantArt, and just sort of looking for things like that and scrolling through people's portfolios that they have online. There's a Facebook group now connecting comic artists and writers. And it's a really good Facebook group because the rules are really, really clearly laid out. If you're a writer and you're looking for an artist, you must publish if this is paid or free, or you must publish a page rate, you must publish, and so you're connecting people in a way that's semi-moderated, so that you're not getting people who are trying to take advantage, and also just educating new people as to, if you want to hire an artist, this is what it looks like, or if you're an artist and need someone to write your script, like here's the right way to go about the professional standards that they have. But yeah, just the legwork of the internet. And I found Pius back, who who did the art for Night Owl Society, through his DeviantArt page. He lives in Lithuania, had not done a sequential story before. He'd done some character designs and some comics. This was his first comic. He's since done comics for Boom and for Dark Horse. He's doing covers for the Stranger Things. He got started with Night Owl Society, but living in Lithuania and doing everything over the internet, we still have never met.
Yeah, I've been to so many conventions where you see a panel and everyone kind of like goes to sit down in their chairs and they're kind of like, "Aha, nice to meet you, nice to meet you." And you're like going, these guys have been working on the same series for years and years, but you don't realize that they don't ever have to be in the same city, country, room at all to make an entire book happen. And that sometimes it's years and years before people meet each other in person. That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, Pius told me one time, because when the book first came out, we were hoping that he could come over to the United States and we could do some shows together. And he said, "My dream one day is to come to the United States." You think, wow, like what we take for granted, sometimes it's a little bit of a reality check. And now with COVID, like I'm not sure, how that would ever work. But he lived in London for a while to get work as a commercial artist and as an illustrator. And then at some point he realized, all my clients were using email and FaceTime anyway. Might as well go back home to Lithuania where he can be with his family and it's a whole lot cheaper than living in London. So, so he's able to be very, very successful. And there's a lot of artists in Malaysia and there's a lot of South American artists that are working in comics now. And I think electronic communication has really opened that up.
Mm-hmm. About your letterer, how did you find them the same way?
Say again?
Your letterer, did you find them the same way?
Yeah, I don't remember where I found Marshall, but some sort of, I think there was another either Facebook group or I'm showing my age. Bulletin board, electronic bulletin board out there somewhere. He's like, yeah, I'm available. And I think Marshall put me in between projects. He's the letterer on Animosity, which is a fantastic series from Aftershock, right? And a very, very well-regarded guy. And I needed him at a time where he had a hole in his schedule. And bam, he was great to work with.
I always think that letterers are that kind of like magical part of comic books that we always see, but we don't ever register in our brains that that's part of the magic that we're viewing. Because when you find like really truly small press people that don't have a letterer, that they just like type in stuff into the computer and you can see that it's like a cut and paste, that it takes you out of the story. You just don't realize how much it pulls you into the story, the lettering does, or can make or break a story if it's not great.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those thankless jobs. Like in the theater, lighting design and sound design are like that. You should never notice the lighting. You should never be sitting in the theater going, wow, those are great lights, because it should just help tell the story. But you really notice it if it's bad. So if you're a good letterer, your job is to tell the story and sort of not be in the way of the story. And if I'm really, really impacted by a story I read in comics, I don't think, wow, that was great lettering. So yeah, you really only get noticed if you're bad. And if you're really, really good, you're not noticed at all. So I think it takes, some experience to really find the good ones. Because they're not noticed.
It's a skill that I'm amazed by, because to my eye, those letters look like they have to be, they're so uniform in the style they're using that they look like they have to be typed or something. But I know that they're hand doing every single one of those, and my mind just cannot wrap itself around the fact that it's so perfect.
Yeah, and that's the hard part about making comics, because it is such a team effort. I have to write a story that fits into a certain number of pages, and the artist has to fit my idea on a page, and the artist has to make a panel that has enough room for letters. So if you have an artist that's also a letterer, that's great. But if you don't, the artist has to at least know, well, there's a lot of dialogue that's going in this panel. I need to put the character in a corner and leave some space for the letter. And the letter's got to make your story fit. And it's really interesting. I did in playwriting, you don't worry about every single word, but in comics you do. Mm-hmm. Like I would look at a panel and go, wow, that's too much. Can I have this character say what they need to say in one sentence instead of two? Or I hate the hyphen. I hate a word that doesn't, it's like, can I pick a different word here that means the same thing, that has fewer letters, so it can fit in this word balloon, so I can see the full character? Like, I don't think people understand the level of detail that you go into if you really want to do it well. Like I have things that within the issue, I want little reveals to happen. And I know that when a reader is looking at they're looking at both pages. Even though they start over here, their eye can still see all of this. So if I have a big surprise, it needs to be saved for a page turn.
Sure.
So that you don't see it in the first part of that 2-page spread. So there will be times where the artist would say, well, you've scripted this for 2 pages. I think it would be better for 3. I'm like, well, it can't be 3. It has to be either 2 or 4, because I need the next thing that happens to be on a page turn. But to me, that's part of the fun of it. Of crafting it, because there's the artistry of writing and drawing, and then there's the craft and the technical side that's just as fun for me.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to get to the fun questions now, because I like these questions.
Okay, good.
I just like to know because I'm nosy. But I'm just going to remind the audience that's watching us, this is a fully interactive show, and we can put your questions up on the screen. So if you have any questions for our guests, you can totally type them in, and we'll see it, and we'll make sure that they get answered. So. All right, so here's my question. Outside of doing now administration, and I'm sure you still do your work in your spare time,
Yes.
And writing books, is there something else that you're into that you do as a secret hobby?
Yeah, I still write plays. And earlier in the pandemic, the theater company in Montana reach out and say, who's got a play that I could do via Zoom, and one of my scripts was a good fit for them, and so they produced that play, and they said, would you write us something else? So when you're in lockdown and you're 8-hour-a-day job is on the screen, and then after that, there's time, and you're with your family, and that's great. But I would spend a little time each morning, set my alarm a little earlier. And I wrote a play called Bitterroot, which is an adaptation of The Tempest by William Shakespeare, for this theater company to do in lockdown. So it was like a lockdown friendly play. And so, yeah, I mean, all forms of entertainment are shifting toward that, right? Like, how can we do things that are pandemic friendly? So if I'm not, working on my own creative stuff, I'm working with our choir teacher now on how to do some like drive-in movie choir concerts where the choir is singing on a stage and the audience is in their cars, and we have an FM transmitter taking the choir concert and everyone's listening to it through their car radio. So, even in my day job, I'm on Amazon looking for the best FM transmitter you can get to do parking lot concerts with. So yeah, the pandemic, it caused everybody to shift. And what kind of coverings do trumpets need so that they're COVID friendly, and what kind of drive-in concerts can we do with the choir, and what kind of theater stuff can we do via Zoom? And this is, it's artistry, and having the fine arts fit in the pandemic that's my day.
Give me 1 second. I am sorry that I'm going to make a big point. Yes, Jenna.
Yes, ma'am.
Try this thing up here.
Oh!
A staff member looking for something, and I'm like trying to like.
I'm kind of busy right now with the thing, so. Or
in the office, maybe there's a section over there. Ask. Oh yeah, this is what a live comic book store is like. You're helping customers all the time.
Hey, you're a retailer. Like, that's what you do, right? You're helping somebody. You're helping someone give you money. Like, that's not a bad thing. Yeah.
I love giving the joy of reading the comic books. So really, it's like a secret thing that really all we're doing as comic book store owners is like getting you to like the things we liked, so we can talk about it later and have chats. It's like making a larger group of us nerds so we can like hang out.
Yeah, and there are certain retail things that are like that. Like, everyone in the yarn store loves knitting. Like, everybody in the comic book store loves comics. Like, I love that. And if you ever go into a comic shop where nobody there seems like they're having fun and nobody really likes what they're doing, I always think, I'm going to check back, because I bet this store's not going to be here after a while.
I would assume they just had a day that I didn't know about before I walked in. I always at least go back one more time to see if like everything is okay. Oh man. So okay, what is the other thing I wanted to ask? Oh, my other fun thing I'd like to ask is, do you have any hidden talents that we don't know about?
Oh man. Yeah, I think I'm one of the lucky people that like everything I do, I get to do as part of my day job and my hobbies. Like, there's so much overlap between the two. But I heard you ask that at the scout panel, and they're like, I used to be a police officer. I used to play baseball. I'm like, I've just been doing this. Like, this is what I do. I act in stories. I write stories. I read stories. I help people tell their stories. No secret. I don't know. I don't think I have a secret.
Don't secretly collect rocks or have a bug collection or.
No, not a thing. Yeah, no, I mean, comics, I think people in the theater world don't need to see the connection with comics, but I've had long boxes full of comics in a closet since the time I was old enough to read. You talked about your mom or your family taking you to see theater for the first time. My sainted mother took me to a comic book convention when I was in junior high, and I remember because I wasn't old enough to drive myself. And if you ever, talk about geeky, going to a comic book convention is one thing. Having your mom drop you off and pick you up from a comic book convention is like a whole other level of nerddom. But this was back in the day. Marv Wolfman was there. I don't think very many issues of New Teen Titans were out yet, maybe the first 10 issues. He was not a featured speaker. He had a little table in the corner, where I went. I think I had all 10 of my issues signed by him. And he was like, yeah, next time we're just going to do one. And so, and David Prowse was there, the guy who just passed recently, who was in the Darth Vader suit for all the movies. And he traveled around with a film canister that you have to have a film projector that was the Star Wars blooper reel. And that was one of the reasons he got invited to so many cons back in the day, is he had great stories. He has a cast member of Star Wars, but that he physically owned the blooper reel. And if you wanted to watch the Star Wars blooper reel, then you got him to come to your comic book show.
Amazing.
Yeah. Featured guest was Chris Claremont. And he was like, I want to talk about certain things that have happened in X-Men recently. Just kind of we want to move on, because at that time his run was very controversial. Any questions? And this little kid, I'm sure prompted by his dad, got to the microphone and said, "Why'd you kill Phoenix?" And he was like, "Oh, come on."
Okay, so this is kids, hit the kid or the dad having this reaction about Phoenix. Like, to me, Chris Claremont is the reason why I fell in love with comic books, because he could write character development so that I cared about the characters so deeply. Like, he's affected me so deeply that to this day I hate Cyclops, because it was in the way of Jean and Wolverine / Professor X. I didn't care which of those would win.
Yeah.
He made me, like, I was bought in. Like, I still hate Scott because he was not a great character as he went on. They wrote him to being a really bad guy.
Yeah, they've taken that farther since then. But he was, and then I think New Teen Titans was kind of a reaction to that of let's make these character driven. And I love Justice League, but when you can put the word panel on any character and still have the story make sense, it's too much story, not enough character. But yeah, Chris was one of the first people to go, let's give these people problems. Let's give them relationships. Let's make them complex. And those two series growing up was, could not wait to get to the comic stop or the stop and go and see the next issue. Like, they just really had you hooked.
Oh yeah, just the storytelling that happens in comic books is kind of this weird world between theater and movies, in which they show you everything, and novels where you have to imagine everything.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between, you still have to imagine everything that happens between panels, or the action that's happening in the panel that you're not seeing the motion of.
Right.
So you get to still use it. The comics become you because you're making part of it yourself.
Yeah, if you've ever heard someone say, "Well, I didn't like such and such actor playing, Wolverine, because in my mind that's not Wolverine's voice." You're like, "Wait a minute, there was never a voice. There were words on a page that, as we just discussed, were done by the letterer. There's no voice except the one that you as the reader put in your head, and to you, that's just as real as the writing. Like, it's a collaborative art form between the reader and the creative team. Because like you said, you fill in information on your own. And you hate Scott, and Scott's not a real person. And so, but there's a level of it that is real to you. There's the hook. That's the hook that good writing and good comics can do. And unlike movies and anything else, the sequential episodic nature of it is just a blast. Mm-hmm. That I'm still a big fan of the floppy, because I want to see each little chapter evolve, and I think the waiting in between is an important part of the story, and crafting it that way.
Comics to me like floppy comics will always be to me what X-Files was to me back in the 90s. Yeah. Where on midnight, no matter what happened, you went and got your box of Taco Bell, tacos for $5. I'm sorry, I was a poor young person then.
Yeah.
We go and sit in front of that TV. You did not miss it. And every single episode, especially this season cliffhangers, had like crazy, like you screamed at the TV because you knew it was a year before you were going to find out what was next, or
right.
What was next. And that's what comic books are when you have them as individual monthly titles or bi-monthly titles.
I think Disney's doing a great job of, because we're in this age of television now where we're a second golden age of television, right? I think kind of started with The Sopranos and The Wire, and it's like continuing. And we've done a little bit with, let's release the whole series at once and let people watch it on their own. But Disney was like, no, Mandalorian, one a week. 1 week's all you get. That episodic nature of it, they know that that's part of how much fun it is. And Have you seen WandaVision yet? Have you seen those 2 episodes?
We haven't, because I was going to be basically doing this all the entire weekend. I'm going to have to try to convince my husband on maybe Tuesday or so on to turn it on, because I was waiting. I haven't seen Mandalorian, but it wasn't because I didn't want to see it. It's because I was waiting to turn it on until Division and Bucky and Sam's shows came on, because those are the ones that I was like, I have to have those. Snippets. Have you got to binge it yet?
Yeah, that's, I won't spoil it for you, but they're both half hours. They're small, little chunks for WandaVision. It's hooked. People are saying, well, it's not enough information. It's not a movie. It's not a beginning, middle, and end. It's a chapter, and some of those chapters just get you a tiny bit hooked. If you have no idea what's going on, I think that's great. I think that's great storytelling. And I think Marvel is in a position now where they can afford to do that. They can put 2 episodes out that have absolutely no forward progress in the plot whatsoever, and they know that all of their audience is coming back. And they're then therefore afforded. They've used the loyalty of their audience to afford them greater artistic freedom to take some more chances, because they know their audience is going to stick with them. It's a brilliant move.
Yeah, they've done all the legwork they needed to do in the right pacing to introduce us to those characters. That they're our family now. Those characters, we feel their pains, and we are with them when their triumphs. We are them. So this, whatever they want to put on, as TV or as movies from now on, I think really anybody that bought in to any of the movies at all is going to be along for the ride.
Yeah, no, I think on the movie side, I think Black Panther and Captain Marvel were, a lot of people saying you can't have a female-centered action movie, you can't have an all-black cast in a superhero movie, and then they did both of them very well because they knew their audience was going to follow them no matter what. Guardians of the Galaxy on paper should not have worked. There's no way that collection of characters should work, and it did. And the audience went, okay, whatever you got, I'll go. If it's got Marvel in front of it, I'm going.
Yeah. Guardians was that first movie that we were like, I don't know anything about those characters. I own a comic book store, and I've been in it since the 90s. I didn't know anything about the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
So taking these characters, like talking raccoon, sure. And we were into that character the moment it hit the screen.
Oh, man. Yeah. Can't wait to see what they do next with it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you so much, James. It was awesome hanging out. Time went way too fast. I can't.
It always goes fast when we talk. Yeah.
It's true.
But, real quick, right behind Jen are some Night Owl Society things that you can get from her. If you haven't read Night Owl Society, you can also get them from me, jamesvenhaus.com. I have the graphic novel, which is a collection of the first 3 issues. I have the first 3 issues if you're a big fan of the floppy. I have some of the variant covers. I know Jen does as well. Support your local comic shop. Buy comics, read comics. Have fun.
Yep. Follow James on all his socials so you can find out when we're going to get the next chapter. That's going to be our character-centered ones. Super excited. We've been waiting with bated breath for a long time for those. Thank you again so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's all.